Yes, it's time for another brisket. This time though, I'm going to be doing it on the SnS Grills Kettle. I was able to find a smaller brisket, which I like that size on kettles. If you try and put a 17-pounder on there, it's really cramming it in. I like 13 or under, and this is an 11.5-pound brisket. First step, I'm just going to get this trimmed up. And as I always say, I'm not a competition cook. I'm a backyard barbecue guy, so I'm going to trim it up as best I can. And there's not too much fat here on the meat side, just gonna clean it up a little bit, and then we'll take off some of the thicker, heavier fat. I'm not gonna worry about getting every tiny little piece off. Just some of the bigger hunks. Before I massacre that anymore, I'm calling that done. And one of the reasons I like to show you when I do things like, cut a little too deep there. Again, I'm not a competition cook. I just like to make brisket. And if you go a little too deep on some of that fat sometime and expose the meat, it's not going to ruin anything. Now it's time to get this rubbed up. And what I'm using is Southern Belle Rub from Gulf Coast Smoke. I want to give a really nice coating here. Don't need any binder. There's good surface moisture. If you want to use a binder, go ahead. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but I'm not smoking this today. It's going to be tomorrow. This is going to sit in the refrigerator overnight with this rub. Give it a chance to absorb some flavor. It's totally not necessary to do that, but if you have the time, I like to do that. All right, I'm going to cover this loosely with some plastic wrap. It's going to go in the refrigerator, and I'll see you tomorrow out at the SnS Grills Kettle. All right, the SnS Grills Kettle is almost up to temp. I'm going for somewhere between 250 and 275-ish today. If I can keep it around 250, I'll be really happy. Let's get our brisket on. Temperature probe in here. That's showing upper 36s right out of the refrigerator, so let's get our lid on and get smoking. Now I have the water reservoir filled, and I have a couple pieces of post oak on there today. We're just gonna let this go. So I'll see you back here in a couple hours when it's time to check this brisket, see if we need to spritz it. All right, we are 2 hours in. Our internal temperature is right around 120, and our kettle temp's right in the mid 260s right now. So let's take a look. Looking good, developing some nice color. Bark is starting to set. I think I'm going to go another hour before I even think about spritzing this. There's still moisture in the water reservoir, so we're going to get the lid back on, let it keep smoking. And I want to mention something that I heard the other day. One of my youngest viewers just had a 4th birthday. So I want to say happy birthday, Miles. And I hope you're still watching me when you're 54 and I'm 106. Happy birthday. So we've been going 4 hours. Now, I know I said I was going to bring you back an hour after the last time, which would have been 3 hours, but I just added a piece of wood at that time and checked it, and it really was looking good, didn't need a spritz, and we've stalled out at 150 degrees. It hasn't moved in like 2 minutes. Now, this is about the low end of the stall that I usually have. It's usually between 150 and 165, and if the bark is set like I'm pretty sure it is, this is the perfect time to wrap it. So let's take a look. That is looking gorgeous. So I'm going to go ahead and get this off here, and we're going to wrap it in foil today because Personally, I just don't like using paper when I'm close to an ignition source, and the slow and sear is just a few inches away. Just personal preference. Get my lid back on so we don't get too hot there. Just want to give this a little bit of moisture. It's a 50-50 mix of water and apple cider vinegar. I get my temperature probe back in about the same place. And that's reading 151, so I'm happy with that placement. All right, let's get the lid back on. Let this finish until we're in that 200 range when I'll start probing for tenderness. All right, we are at the 7-hour mark. Our internal temperature is right close to 184 degrees. And I let the temperature ride up on the SnS Grills Kettle because everything's wrapped now. But I am starting to notice that I'm having trouble keeping that temp up by opening the vents more. 7 hours is about the time when I notice that the slow and sear starts to use up its fuel. So I'm going to add some more charcoal. Now we do still have charcoal in here, but as you can see, it is burned down pretty good. So what I want to do is slide this over to the side, knock the ash off. I'm just going to add some fresh briquettes and they'll ignite just like they would have if they were in here from the beginning. And that'll just help carry us through to the end. So I'll see you back here when we're at, I don't know, 202, 203, and it's time to probe this for tenderness. All right, we just hit 202 degrees internal. We've been going right on 9 hours. Let's probe for tenderness. I'm gonna do a quick little check down in the flat here first. I'm gonna try not to go all the way through to the bottom foil. That feels very tender. Let's try our point side here. Yeah. See that, that's showing 205 on that one. So we are good. This is gonna go in a foil pan. It's gonna be covered by foil and it's just gonna go sit in my oven, which is off, for 2 hours to rest. So I'll see you inside in a couple hours when it's time to cut into this brisket. All right, here is our brisket. It's been resting for 2 hours. And just as a point of interest here, I want to take a temperature just so we can see what the internal temperature is after 2 hours of just resting in a foil pan covered in foil. Let's see. That's showing 175 degrees after 2 hours of sitting. So yeah, your brisket will hold for 2, 3, 4 hours. I mean, if you put this into an empty ice chest, wrapped in foil, wrapped in towels, it's gonna hold for several hours. I just happen to have the oven empty, no heat on. Does a great job when you're just doing it for a couple hours inside. Now let's cut in. And I know a lot of times I'll separate the flat from the point, but I'm leaving them together today, and I am just going straight across here. Now I did use foil, not butcher paper, so that bark is going to be a little softer. That's just something that, you know, you have to choose. All right, let's see. Ah, nice and juicy. Let's cut some slices. I want to go down here to the flat end and cut some slices. And as I said, you can see the bark is a little bit softer because I did use foil. Get a slice out of here. That is hot. Nice and bendy. Pulls apart nice. Nice and tender. Very happy with that. Let me get way down to the end here and get just some point. The point is my favorite part. Oh, that is tender. And now this is cutting with the grain right here, and we want to cut against it. Remember, the point and the flat, opposite grains. So let's cut across that grain here now. That is looking super tender. Look at that. I'm not waiting anymore. It's time to taste. So let's go with some of the point first. I know I usually start with the flat, but I got the point right here and I'm ready. That is so beefy. It's the quintessential brisket flavor. That rub is really, really good. That Southern Belle rub. It just really helped enhance the flavor. You add that with the post oak smoke, which wasn't a lot because we're using chunks, not burning post oak, but it does all work together and really nice flavor on this. Now let me try a piece of that flat. There we go. That is juicy, that is tender. If you can get that in a flat, which is sometimes difficult to get, the flat can have a tendency to dry out, but wrapping it does help. And I have to say, using foil, I've found, does help that flat more than just butcher paper. Butcher paper is nothing wrong with it, but if you really want to make sure that you have a juicier flat, I've found that foil really does help. You do sacrifice a little bit in the bark texture, but for this, I think it's worth it. And I've just got to go one more piece of that point. Oh, this is good.